Hi, this is Joseph Arthur. Thanks for checking out Come to Where I'm From. Please support us on Patreon, patreon.com/come to where I'm from. We are an independent podcast, and any contributions you can make are greatly appreciated. Today's episode is Robyn Hitchcock. I've been going down a rabbit hole.
Oh, really?
It's like phenomenal, your songs.
Thank you.
Yeah. That Queen Elvis one is particularly spectacular. And then there's one about unresolved personality crisis.
Oh, uncorrected personality traits. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
That is like, it's so incredibly complicated lyrically, like in terms of just like understanding human psychology and like, just like the whole, like what creates our sexualities and stuff like that, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, like,
thanks.
Seems like you've done a lot of introspection in that regard.
I don't know, really. Songs, as you know, they have a mind of their own, and they may form, they may crystallize inside you for a long time, and then they'll come out. Mm-hmm. I feel like that they're hewn in a different chamber, different cave in the head from how your conscious mind and your intentions go. So maybe some thoughts crystallized in me a long time back, and then they just they just came out perfectly formed. But that seldom happens with songs. A lot of songs are fusing bits and pieces together, and occasionally you'll get something that comes out like a nugget, intact, and that was one such. I mean, there was no effort involved. I just realized I was singing it to myself, and I thought, oh, hang on, this is coming through. So it's like taking dictation,
Man, and it's it could be like a psychological thesis, probably, like in a less than 2 minute long song.
Well, you never know what's going to pop out of your head, really, do you?
No, particularly if you're you. And me, I guess, but you.
Well, I suppose in this business, you're encouraged. In some ways, you're encouraged to let things come out. In other ways, you're sort of, especially now, kind of the business, the song, it's been around so long that the channels, the grooves are quite well worn, indie rock, Americana, stuff that's been around a long time. And then lots of stuff I really don't know what it is because I'm quite old, so I just feel like if I was a kid now, I'm not sure I would be a musician. Really? I think I came in at a good window. I think it's harder for people, if I was 19 now, would I be hanging around with it, sitting in the bedroom with the acoustic guitar instead of a girlfriend kind of thing. Right. I mean, all that old stuff is still there to be, in a way, it's very history driven now. So you'll get 19-year-olds who are sitting there listening to Nick Drake and wishing themselves into that world. I don't know.
And you, though. There's probably lots of 19-year-olds listening to you.
What, wanting to me? Boy, I hope so, yeah.
Yeah, there definitely is.
Well, a lot of people who used to... I get people bringing their kids, and their kids are grown up now, and the kids are bringing their parents to the shows. I bought Dad a ticket to your show for his birthday. It's that kind of thing. But I don't know. Any communication with another human being is a wonderful thing. If the chance arises.
Sometimes.
But you say things you don't always know how they're going to be received. So and often people will think you might have meant more by something than you did, but that's good. The most important thing is to appeal to people's imaginations. The people I loved as a kid, there's going to be a big old sort of, it's going to be a Dillathon again up there. Everybody kind of going through their favorite Dylan songs. Bob Dylan appealed to people's imaginations like David Bowie did. And I suppose all of us in our own spheres, you have to hope that you do appeal to people's imaginations. I don't know, you must get that. you know.
Yeah, how do you think that happens? Well, like, or what determines that? It, like, to the degree or lack thereof.
I think it's intention. Really think if you listen to enough records and it's something you want to do, then you will eventually be able to do it. I mean, I had no musical talent. I was good with words from a very early age, you know, and I could name all the dinosaurs by the time I was 6, and I was probably a real pain to the olders around me, you know, because what's important to a 6-year-old doesn't always strike a tired adult in quite the same way. But I had no musical gifts, and I just so badly wanted to be one of those people that I'd look at, you're 15, or, you know, those records come in my case, being 15, being 13 was my sort of psychedelic bar mitzvah. I was 13 the year Blonde on Blonde and Revolver came out, and so I was 16, I was 15 when Are You Experienced came out, and Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and you know, the first Airplane records and Forever Changes and the Velvet Underground first, all that came through into my 14-year-old third eye. So by the time I was 15, it was a no-brainer. That was where I wanted to go. It doesn't mean I necessarily was going to have any success at it. But I was magnetized. And I think if you're magnetized by something, in the end, you yourself become magnetic to some degree. I mean, not the same, you know. Very few people became the modern equivalent of the Beatles or
Did anyone?
Dylan. Well, some people did in terms of popularity.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, you know, people like REM were enormously popular, and they were people with a big collective love of music, and they drew on an awful lot. But, you know, by the time REM became prominent, all they could lend their weight to political causes, and they could advertise, you know, do a poster where they're all reading a book saying, hey, kids, read a book. You know, but they weren't, there wasn't a position to be an avatar of modern consciousness.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, like, you couldn't be...
like John Lennon was?
Yeah, and hopefully you wouldn't meet the same fate. So no matter how much people adored Michael Stipe, he wasn't going to be the same kind of figure. He couldn't be. Even Bono, you know, Bono might go out and do an awful lot of good, and he may have saved many lives, and he's very careful to make friends rather than enemies. You know, his whole, he seems to be a very diplomatic, inclusive kind of guy, but I don't think they're not in a position to reflect the times and create the times the same way, because the times aren't the same. The momentum between 1962 and 1969 was vast. The momentum between 1980 and 2000, you can measure it out in technology. I mean, the last 20 years, if somebody walked in here wearing clothes from 1995, could we even tell?
Right.
You know,
I think I am wearing clothes from 1995.
Well, me too.
I love Robyn. He always shows up with the best T-shirts, shirts.
That's not a T-shirt, bro.
Sure. It's always with dots. Always.
This has actually only got. This is only
great T-shirts.
This has got. This has got semi dots. But no.
Last time I saw you wore a bright red shirt, also with dots.
I've got some dots with me in my suitcase. Yeah, upstairs. The dots will be out tonight. But you know that. I mean, that's all from the '60s. Dylan and the Beatles all wore polka dots. I think the Beatles had them before Dylan did.
Yeah.
It's all Carnaby Street. You know. I mean, I'm not doing anything new. My claim to fame, if anything, is to be a stopped clock. Somebody who reliably catapults people back to 1967 on some level or other, you know, whether you know, and
but I think that's too reductive. I mean, even if you don't mean it to be.
Well, it's one of
'Cause
my
I
tricks.
I think you're up in that echelon of those people. It's just interesting what you're saying of, yeah, it's times. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, yeah, to reach that position of culture, I guess, what you're talking about, like, just kind of became impossible, I guess, on some level, even if it was like, even if you became even more famous or as famous, like in the case of Bono, still the weight of the personality in culture is different than it was.
It's different because in a way it's all been done before.
Yeah.
And what those people were doing just by chance had never happened in our culture as we know it.
Yeah.
And I always see myself as the last 60s character to hatch out. You know, my window of prominence was actually the late 80s and early 90s when I was on MTV a bit and I had a couple of radio hits. I never sold much, you know.
Right.
I've always existed more like a folk singer, really. But my attitude, for ill or good, is based on the attitudes of those people in 66, 67, whatever it was. I don't know if they knew what they wanted to be. They were just those sort of explorers, really. And I see myself psychically as part of that. So when I say I'm a stopped clock, I say that with a certain amount of pride.
Right.
I maintain,
sort of
I'm like a little sort of, I don't know, Gibraltar or, some place with a microclimate that technically shouldn't exist, but somehow I do. And I mean, eventually I'll be swept away, but I touch wood, people kind of let me do what I do. And I hope I still have that attitude to songs, which is that you can put anything you want in a song. Songs are they're not simply something to accompany your lifestyle.
How do you mean that?
I mean that songs are sort of can be essentially pop music celebrates life under capitalism, and so in the sort of the explosion of money post-war kind of.
You're talking about current pop music.
I think
I
think it probably always has to.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of the way it's distributed.
It's popular.
It's popular, and so even if actually it's popular to say capitalism sucks and that kind of thing, it's revolt into style. Essentially, I do, but I think it's really that's an extension of saying human nature sucks, which it does, and this is the big problem is it's very hard to get to number one by saying human nature sucks. Having said that, in a way, that's just what Bob Dylan has always said. So there is a market, an audience for it if you say it the right way.
Well, I think if you just said it like that, maybe you would get number one. Human nature sucks.
Well,
that's pretty good.
I will put that. I'll put that as a release that as a single.
Yeah.
Good evening, world. I got some news for you. What's that? Human nature sucks. Oh boy, yeah.
I mean, there's the intro.
Yeah.
I can hear it.
Hey, do I suck? Yes. And me? You suck. Sure. Do I suck? You totally suck. Woo. Yeah. I mean, it's
wow.
And everything that happens.
Human nature does suck.
Well, it does, and also, and this isn't news. The worst people rise to the top.
Do you think so?
Malfeasance is rewarded. It's proved.
What's malfeasance mean?
Malfeasance is wrongdoing,
okay.
Evil. It's a term that a friend of mine in Tucson uses.
I love that word, but
he was using it about the neocons, who now seem like a quaint early form of kind of like some kind of rash or outbreak that's infectious for a couple of weeks and dies away. You think how terrifying Rumsfeld and Cheney and that lot seemed, but now it's like, fine, at least those guys could read. And
I won't forget something. He last time I saw you was 2016 down here in this very room, and it was the day of the election. And you did a session, and you said just before the session, I hope everybody does the right thing today.
Well, that's a rare burst of optimism from me then.
Yeah. I thought about that today.
No. you know, and
It didn't go our way.
it didn't, and I also hope that they do but who knows what everybody is, you know. It's Britain has similar problems. Australia has similar problems. But it's basically a fundamental flaw in human nature that it's that the old saying, you know, one rotten apple spoils the barrel. You can't have 100 villainous, mean-minded people and 3 righteous souls enter the room, and somehow the villainous people all kind of become detoxic and right, okay, this is great, I'm in the presence of goodness, I'm going to lay down my, you know, what you need, you know, one person with a machine gun can kill 100 people who are unarmed, and that's essentially what's been happening politically all around the world. There's just thugs, you know, and thugs and bullies are hard to stand up to. The domino effect of fascism is proven, and it's very easily done. And there is a kind of low cunning genius in people who operate like that, like the current president, his bumbling, you know, I say old boy counterpart in Britain, Boris Johnson. And these people are not good people, but you know, I mean, that's self-evident.
Right.
But the problem is that there's something in human nature that keeps allowing these people to come back. You can't just say, oh, it's a result of bad economic choices or, you know, technology or an earthquake or something. No, the shittiest people keep rising to power, because what good person would want power over others, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
I don't want power over people. I'd like people to listen to me, and so I can make enough money to keep doing it. But I don't want to dominate, and I don't want. Big crowds frighten me. I mean, as you can see from my career, I don't have to deal with them. So you know,
it reminds me of your song "I Want to Destroy You."
Oh God. Yes.
Like, and that song to me is like a sort of anthem of narcissistic personality disorder. But that's the way I listen to it. You know, it could mean a lot more different things too. But like just that human nature of actually wanting to destroy somebody. You could mean it in a good way too. I mean, it's such it's oddly such a great uplifting song. You know,
I think that's the harmonies that Morris and Kim put in.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.
Like, but what do you think of that? Do you know anything about like narcissistic personality disorder and I guess all the stuff you're talking about? But do you think that song relates to what you're talking about?
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, I wrote it in 79, so it's 40 years old now.
It still sounds so good, man. If that came out today, it'd be like crushing. You know.
Well, it last appeared as a Subway commercial, so you know, which was great.
Oh, really? Got paid?
Oh, we got paid, so you know, it's great. We all got
Subway.
Everybody needed some money. Yeah, I don't even eat chicken teriyaki, but that's what it was used for.
Tell.
Really?
So, well, actually, the first thing I ever ate when I came to New York in 1980 was a Subway sandwich. So there's karma for you.
Yeah. There you go.
But no, we that was that kind of that song is. It's essentially a processed song about the self-destructive nature of people, about people's desire to about not just the killer instinct, but the instinct to kill yourself. You know, to punch the mirror. And it seems like that's really what so much of humanity is about punching the mirror. You know, it cost for 15 million lives in the Great War. Germany, Britain and France, and then America spent 4 years just pouring men into, not even into coffins, just into horrific death in the mud because that's what they did. You know, when things like that come up, you just think that now is the time for assisted suicide, and there's no knowing when any of us is going to find it. The best alternative is to take your own life rather than face what's coming. I never think.
Wait,
you know.
What?
Well,
you mean even if your health is still intact.
Your health is intact, but if the world gets to a certain point, when certainly if it came to the use of nuclear weapons, which could, you know,
Could happen
it could happen any second. there are a lot of fates that would be worse than just dying in your own hands. I just feel that's something I've got to be aware of. It's not the same as a depressed person taking their life. It's just thinking, like people when the Nazis were smashing through Europe. You'd get people who just knew they would be better off slitting their wrists before the knock came on the door and the boots came through the glass, that kind of thing.
This reminds me though of I feel like the best way to combat that is to become hopelessly optimistic and sort of fight off despair, because despair's like if that whole comment, if you look into the abyss looks back at you sort of thing.
Yes, I mean the abyss.
And we can we can resist despair. In other words, because I feel like the media is pushing us to despair and all that stuff. And I know it sounds and then people say, well, you have it easy. It's easy for you to say to resist despair if you say something like that. It's hard to even say something like that because then people are like, you motherfucker, you're privileged. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even saying resist despair and be optimistic is a hard thing to say because you come off sounding like a dupe, But I feel like that's the other thing is too dark to imagine. We're gonna cut our wrist now because nuclear bombs are gonna, are imminent.
Well, I wouldn't do it now. I'd wait till it'd gone off. I'm not talking about
till you get that tweet, nuclear bomb.
I'm not. Yeah, I don't.
Robyn, it's a go.
It could be a conspiracy.
That's another reason I'm off Twitter and I don't have the news on my phone and things.
Really?
I'd get something saying North Korean missile lands in the sea just off Japan. What the fuck, Jesus, this doom is vibrating against my femur as I'm walking along,
People are addicted to it.
I am addicted to it.
The amount of bad information, or not bad information, negativity that comes from your phone.
That's what I mean.
If you get the news feed, just the news feed.
Yeah, just the news feed, or then you go on Instagram and see all the people having a better life than you, and it's it gets depressing.
I think I'd rather see the better life. Actually, I quite like Instagram because people tend to they Instagram what they like.
Yeah.
Cats, guitars, anniversaries, favorite gigs I've been to.
Here's a tune.
Here's a tune. Where
When did you disconnect from Twitter?
I go on and off. None of my habits are permanent except cheese. That's the only thing I do all the time.
Did you ever get into stand-up comedy or anything like that? You're so good with the banter. You have a particular gift with that.
Thank you.
Gift of words.
Gift of gab.
I'm lucky in that.
Psychedelic gab.
I went along to some comedy clubs and I put my toe in it, but actually, away from the guitar. It's not really for me.
It's hard,
and also comedy, you've got to rely on a script and all that stuff. And I like to improvise.
Some people
I don't like to. You can. I think the great thing is you've got as a comedian, you have your set pieces like songs, and then you can riff in between them and see where it goes.
Yeah.
But I don't think I couldn't face being up there without a guitar. And also it's a balance. The songs come from feeling and the words come from thinking, if you like. So the verbal stuff is kind of intellectual and it resolves itself in laughter. The songs are basically quite sad,
emotional,
and I've just realized that camera's on and I haven't been sitting up straight. Shit. Here we are. That's better. So this is a good. You don't have to yet, but when you're my age, every inch counts, man. Here we are. That's it. So yeah, I'm lucky in that respect.
Yeah. Well, your words do seem to come from the subconscious, though, too. Because your dad was a novelist, right?
He was an interesting series of people. He was a soldier, then he was a kind of electronic communications engineer, early satellites and stuff he was involved in. And then he started.
He made satellites?
He was involved in what became Mercury communication satellites. I have no idea what he did. He might have been a spy. He used to go to conferences. He'd go up to London every day, and he started drawing cartoons and doing paintings, and then he did less. He sort of still went to conferences, but he painted at home and did cartoons, and then he mutated into a novelist.
That's crazy.
And he wrote his first novel was about a man who needs a penis transplant, and he gets one, and then he eventually finds out who the donor is. So it's what the British press called a romp, and it was made into a movie.
Was that Percy?
Percy, yeah. And Ray Davies and the Kinks did the music.
That's
so
amazing, dude. That's crazy.
So that catapulted my father Raymond. He suddenly earned an awful lot of money, and then it never happened again, but it kind of launched him.
That's incredible.
And then he wrote a variety of sort of spy stories, and a really good book about people back to World War One, people tunneling under enemy lines because it was a stalemate for 4 years. The Germans and the Allies would both spend, months tunneling under each other's lines, hoping they could make a tunnel big enough to send a whole load of their troops through. And both sides did it. And in my father's book, there's a point where a German tunnel and a British tunnel meet up, and what happens then? And
what happened?
It's not good, but at least one of them survives. But it's basically sad. That was a very great, really good book, and he wrote those. He never did music. So the one thing I do that he didn't is music. That's probably why I do it.
That's wild.
So, but I was raised,
you do all those things too. You're a cartoonist and a painter and everything.
I can draw and paint
stories.
and write, but my main thing is music. Because it's the most emotional. So,
that's
you must have that. You can't keep away from the guitar or the piano. If you spend more than a week away from an instrument, you start to wilt. You just there's some oxygen that's not getting through to your system. And I'm about to start some more paintings and illustrations. After quite a long gap, I'm now going to start doing that again. But in terms of just playing, you have to kind of play and sing. It's good for the soul.
It is, isn't it?
And more than anything, I suppose that's probably the prime addiction, along with cheese.
There's that cheese again. What's with you and cheese?
Well, I know Shlomo's got some cheese up there. I'm hoping they're going to bust. I hope they're going to. Well, actually, I'm a bit.
We should have a cheese plate.
Yes, what? No cheese platter?
Our research was off, I guess.
Been here at the
we would have
winery for an hour, and no one's produced a cheese platter. But yeah, no, I'm very close to cheese.
What's your favorite type of cheese?
It's a red French cheese that looks Dutch, and it has an enormous specific gravity mass. Like, I think, particles flying through space are drawn to this stuff. It's in a kind of sphere. Almost looks like a
red plastic type of thing?
Well, it's almost, yeah. It's called mimolette. It kind of looks like a honey cantaloupe melon from the out, if you cut a slice of it. But it's very dense and thick, hard to cut, not good to eat if your teeth are going to fall out, but then what is?
Yeah.
And mimolette is probably my favorite, along with manchego and pecorino. But good cheddars will work. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you like cheese?
I do. Yeah, like raw milk ones.
Oh.
I try to stay away from the pasteurized stuff. I'm into goat milk kefir lately.
Goat milk kefir? What's that?
It's like yogurt drink made out of goat milk. I drink like a quart of it every day. It's weird.
Is it
but it's
kind
like
of
probiotic type
so
of
it's
stuff.
good on the stomach.
I think so.
Probably very settling. Do you drink coffee?
I drink a ton of coffee.
Okay.
That's probably why I'm drawn to it.
You probably need the kefir bed on which the coffee can fall.
Something's happening because I'm weirdly drawn to it. I go to it every day at Whole Foods and get it after yoga class. Do you do anything like you're maintained really well? You know, like, do you do anything like yoga, exercise? What's your
I
routine?
walk a lot, and I sometimes and I cycle. I haven't got. Occasionally, I go to the torture gym, where they compress a week's activity into 8 minutes, and the following day your whole body aches. If you do this enough, you develop mysterious pectorals, but I haven't quite done that. But I do little things, you know, just to kind of stop myself becoming completely obese and degenerate. So I'm always giving something up, except for cheese,
Right.
pretty much, and coffee. So I will go in and out of all the other things that you can do. I don't eat meat. I don't eat crap. But, you know, then things like chips, fries are very hard to resist sometimes.
Yeah.
And avoid, I don't know, you look good.
Thank you. I exercise a lot.
Well, I've seen pictures of you
And I
on
post and I
Instagram,
annoyingly post about it.
running around, and you look extremely fit.
I am, like, it's my new addiction.
Well,
But I think it's a good one.
It's
you
good.
know.
It's all you know, it's use your compulsion.
Exactly.
A lot of us have to keep doing the same things, so you
Yeah.
just want to make them into something
Something
positive.
Good. Exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you know, I
'Cause Lord
really
knows
think-
I've done the other thing in the past.
Well,
And so it's like, it's nice to, and then this one's been consistent. I've been doing it pretty consistently for about 3.5 years now.
wow, well done.
So yeah, it's not just a phase anymore. I feel like I'm out of the phase category and into, like, this could be a lifestyle.
Well, it takes a while to reprogram oneself,
Well,
doesn't it?
yeah.
That's the thing.
That's why I've been working on hardcore.
And where do you live?
I live in the city. I live in East Village, Avenue A,
So those pictures of you jogging around
East River.
Right, okay, because that's what people do in movies, you know that.
Yeah.
If somebody goes
I'm starring in
jogging,
my own movie.
welcome to the world.
Welcome to all of us.
Welcome to New York.
Yeah.
God. Well, that looks good. I mean, I just assume there's going to be some spies jogging along behind you, or a couple of dames
Yeah.
who are in the middle of an interesting breakup with the same guy or something, you know.
Yeah.
There's going to be all these things, but it looks very familiar. It's the East River.
Yeah, East River. I got a
Okay.
new song called East River Run, but it didn't make my new album, which comes out October 11th.
Oh,
That's a
great.
plug. Yeah.
Good.
But you also were saying, like, okay, that you had a gift for lyrics, but you didn't consider yourself particularly, I guess, musically gifted, or I don't know if that's not how you put it. But
I didn't have an aptitude for it. I had to force it.
But okay, because your musical gift is real extreme. I feel like in songwriting wise, like, I tend to write like 3-chord songs, whereas yours are like, you know, very kind of melodically complicated and chord structurally like unusual, but in a way that's not like at all boring, and it still rocks, and it's like that's what the
thank
Beatles
you.
were good at too, like stuff like that. But like, so I feel like you have this unusual aptitude towards both lyrical gifts and musical gifts, which I think is unusual, because a lot of times people are really good at lyrics, but they tend to just write 3 chords, which is fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's nothing wrong with that. But
No.
you know what I mean? Can you expand on that at
I
all?
think too few chords is better than too many.
That's true.
You
I would
know,
definitely agree with that.
that saying the 3 chords and the truth thing. And
Yeah.
you can actually...
Or Lou Reed said, any more than 2 chords is jazz.
Well, he had his jazz phase, you know.
For sure.
I mean,
fretless bass.
Jacques and all those the stuff in the 70s with the sax player Marty Fogel or whatever, and you know, he was teetering down the jazz path for a while.
Yeah.
But I
Berlin.
think you can reduce, like you can simplify a lot of Beatles songs to 3 chords, but actually they might have 6. But the Beatles, now you mention them, you know, who are in the pantheon of the sacred along with cheese for me. But the Beatles,
Wait, they're up there with cheese?
they're up there with cheese and
Come
obsolete
on.
electric
Now you're-
attraction. Oh yeah,
Now
no.
you're going a little crazy.
Oh man,
Like,
Paul McCartney, Mimolette. No, actually, John Lennon's Mimolette. McCartney's probably Pecorino. Ringo's a Brie, and George is probably a wholesome. Oh, actually, George, he might be a moody blue cheddar, and one of those blue Stilton-y ones, you know.
Something you put on a steak.
Yeah, please. Poor old George, yes. Harrison on steak, you know, we had supper there once. I've just been in Britain, so I can imagine it. But yeah, you know, they never seemed too complex. They were very good at being smart enough not to seem clever.
Yeah.
There's a real art,
they have, like yours, they have good choruses.
Yeah, they have.
Like you never forget about, oh, here's a good chorus. And you have a melodic gift, so it's fun. I'm not trying to like completely compliment you over and over again, but it's just true. And like you're, you know, like you're like, it's fun. Like you don't forget the fun.
Oh well, I think the darker it gets, the lighter it needs to be. You know, so if you've got some, that was the problem with one of the problems with George Harrison. You know, he got terribly serious and he got very miserable, and people don't necessarily want to. But all that stuff in the 70s, living in the material world, and you know, help me, Lord, to rise above these people, and all that kind. You know, it was very. It was like hippies gone sour. But you just kind of, in a way, the more grim you're dealing with in terms of thoughts, the more snappy it has to be presented. Which is why it always winds up as comedy. I want to, you know, it's that. Yeah, you know, you can't make things sound as bleak as they are.
Like balance.
You know,
like a good cheese.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You need balance.
For every Mimolette, there must be a Paul McCartney. You know, I saw him in Las Vegas a few weeks ago, and have you seen McCartney?
No.
Still worth it. His voice is a little thinner, but he is in fantastic shape, and he'll go on for 3.5 hours, and
it still holds up for you.
Well, he's obviously really into it.
Music is ageless. You're ageless, man. I was surprised. I mean, you know, I didn't know how old you were when I saw it. I was like, oh, I thought you were like 10 years younger than that at least. I didn't, you know, not that it's a numbers thing. It doesn't really matter because, you know, but I'm just saying, like, I think music preserves youth, but also we're learning that there is no time limit with music as we once thought. Don't you think?
Well, it's rock and roll started as a young man's game, and now it's an old folks game. You know, the prime exponents are all in their mid-70s.
Yeah.
The only thing is, like, I can't see even the Stones and McCartney lasting more than another 15 years. I mean, they may outlast our civilization as we know it, but
once they get the chips put in their brain, it's like they can just go on forever.
Well,
plus they're going to get cloned.
Funny you should say that. I mean, we are merging with our phones now.
Yeah, that's happening. Elon Musk.
And we can't afford to lose our phones. They're going to have to become implants. And once they become implants, they're going to become emotionally involved with us.
Yep. And
we with them. I suspect if we don't destroy ourselves as a species, we're going to become iPhones, and this may be the purpose of human existence, that we've spawned these things.
Yeah.
Hey viewers, can you see this? I'm holding an Apple iPhone 9, 10, something like that.
Should we talk about conspiracy theories?
This is your distant great grandmother. This. Hello.
Hello, Gran.
What's it like in there?
Not so bad. How yourself? Had a nice cup of tea.
Oh yes, lovely. I'm with Mr. Arthur.
Oh, Mr. Ehud. Yeah, he's just over there. Look. Oh, look, Mr. Hello.
And they're gonna. That's probably going to be our legacy, is the phones, and they won't age. And it's possible. Maybe there's a chip in Paul. I don't know.
That might change.
The chip
I mean,
is happening.
If you look at the phones,
I'm not getting the chip.
It's been 12. It's only been 12 years since like the iPhone revolution.
Yes.
It could still take a positive turn somewhere.
Well, I'm not saying it's not positive that we merge with our phones. It may be the only way we survive.
Yeah.
You know, everything's inevitable with hindsight, and there'll probably be, if there is any historical memory of this period in a couple of 100 years' time, they'll say this was whatever it is, will say this was a time of enormous technological evolution and psychic unrest, and it was only when Sir William Apple discovered the iPhone in 2008 that the path became clear, and St. Jobs, may his soul forever rotate, saw the whatever it is, and then, but they'll get some things confused, like they'll think Peter Frampton invented the fax machine or something. There'll be little bits of inaccuracy. They'll think that
He didn't.
Damn it! I know. It's
Well, no, it was the talk box.
It's
that's
another
right,
crusher. Oh yeah. Oh God, you remember that far back?
Of course.
Was that like "Oh Baby I Love"?
That was like, Frampton Comes Alive.
Yeah. Did he have that?
I'm 47. I mean, I'm not that young.
I suppose not.
Yeah,
no,
I'm
you're not that old.
I'm not that old. I'm not that young. I'm in betweener.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I like it. So, what do you think is the best? I want to talk about Beatles solo albums or conspiracy theories.
Beatles solo album.
Which way should we go?
Let's go Beatles solo albums. I know more about them,
For
but I'm
200.
But we can probably merge them.
No, they have to interlink somehow. But like, what did you think of John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band album?
That's my favorite Beatles solo album.
Mine too.
I kind of think after that he could have packed it in. I'm not sure he had anything much to say after that. It was like it all came out.
It was an amazing one.
And it left him as a bit of a kind of crater. I think it was sort of like he
So
was
good.
still there,
What
but
songs are on that?
Mm-hmm. Mother. It starts with Mother.
I found out.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, John. Well, which is a total favorite. Just that. I mean, that's a record he couldn't have made with the other Beatles. He had Ringo, but he didn't need Paul or George on that.
I think George played on.
George is on Imagine.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But
you're right.
Imagine's a much mellower record, and it's more inconsistent. After that, he had a couple of
That's true.
I love his voice, but I think he kind of, I just think he was probably. It was probably more burned out than people realised.
Yeah.
Paul was still boppy, and Paul was always the right side of his drugs, and Paul had the catchy tunes. And what I think about the Beatles solo is that they're like, if you separate a colour photograph, have you seen them when they break a colour photo down into blue, yellow, pink, and red and green, and you see the same image, but in a different color. And each of those images, there's something slightly suffocating, like, oh God, blue and white, or oh God, yellow and white. It's too much of just this one hue. You put them all together, and you've got color. It's brilliant. And I feel like the Beatles separated into individual colors, and much as I love green, there's only so much green you can take, and
but All Things Must Pass is pretty brilliant.
That's good, but again, that was the songs he'd built up, a lot of them that others wouldn't record, and Paul.
So it still had that.
Yeah,
energy.
it still had. I think the Beatles albums were best when they were still competing with each other.
Yeah, that competition is good
that
in
competition.
music.
And then I think George, got hopelessly lost. John and George got very self-involved and lost, and Paul stayed snappy, but even Paul had less and less to.
Well, that degree of fame, I think, probably kind of messes you up a little bit. Plus, for people like us, it's still about survival. There's still an element of hey, I gotta there's that fuel of survival that's still pushing you. If you're completely taken care of and comfortable, I think it's you're working oddly against that sort of melees or apathy in a way, which how hard this stuff is to do. So to have that nuclear fuel of I don't want to be homeless is really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the big plus of it.
That's a big plus.
I mean, there were a lot of things. There were a lot of things going against the Beatles solo, not least of which was that it was after 1970 and the momentum years were over. Things were no longer accelerating as fast as they had between 62 and 69. They, the Beatles left a completely different world from the one they came into. But modern life kind of began in about 1969. People after that didn't have to be married to have sex. It was generally accepted that people would probably. Sorry, Joseph.
Wait, I've been waiting all this time.
Don't let them find out on the East Side River Run.
Yeah. So the Plastic Ono Band album too. Like the production of it particularly is like super raw and amazing too.
Yeah.
Also produced by Phil Spector. But
I don't know what he did about it.
Super minimal.
You can hear Phil Spector on All Things Must Pass, can't you?
He's overdoing it almost.
Big sound.
Arguably.
Yeah.
But what I liked about the Plastic Ono Band was that minimalism, and there was this old video I saw of Yoko Ono actually saying like, "Hey, the band's being too jammy. Make them focus more." And did you ever see that? Where
no, not
she
on that
actually
one. Yeah.
gave input like that was like, really good input.
Oh, right. Was that on? Is that on the Imagine session or the?
Maybe it was the Imagine session, but it could have been that. But it's the similar advice to what ended up being Plastic Ono Band vibe and sound. Even though maybe that was before Imagine, but
Plastic Ono Band, I always thought was influenced by Bob Dylan's John Wesley Harding. That it was a kind of deliberately underdubbed.
You could see all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, you could see the bottom. There was no kind of let's put a keyboard in here just to make it nice, and let's cushion this with some nice sounds. They were both records that seemed to be very much about just the songs and the statement and the absolute bare minimum. I mean, John Wesley Harding's much less emotional and it's quite oblique.
It's one of my favorites.
Well, it's him stepping away from what he'd created.
Blonde. It was the one right after Blonde on Blonde, wasn't it? Which is crazy. After the motorcycle accident, and then it's like the weirdest, most minimal album ever.
Right, and I feel like that might have influenced John when he made his stepping away from the Beatles. Okay, I'm just not going to have the lushness, the orchestrations, the harmonies, all the, Dylan didn't have harmonies, but Blonde on Blonde was quite a jungle of sound, and it's that thing of, like, I'll just step away and cut out everything. I mean, it's a good thing to do occasionally, and if you ever do that with records, I mean, not that we're in those sort of positions that those guys were in, but just like, okay, what's the essence?
Yeah.
I'm gonna make an essence record here, and that will sound deliberately unfinished almost, but whatever is in the songs is going to come through. I don't know. It's a good thing to try from time to time.
Absolutely. But it's more powerful. I feel like a lot of the modern pop music, like trap music, kind of is in that realm too, like super minimal. Like I think like one thing I could say good about new pop music and trap music is they really do like embrace minimalism.
What's trap music?
Like, I guess modern pop music or like sort of hip hop oriented. I don't know the different why it's called trap music. It's probably a certain tempo and beat, but just that sort of 808s and just a vocal, just that real minimal sound.
Oh, really?
Like, I don't know. Hip hop also has brought in a lot of that minimalism.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that a newish thing?
It's just what I've noticed about pop music. Like, there's some of that going on, and that's kind of cool. That's sort of inspiring.
Oh, that's good. I mean, I can't really. I don't know, the way stuff that I assume is in the charts sounds now is so different from the way I think about songs being written. For me, songs are written on a piano or a guitar.
Yeah, these are written on laptops.
Yeah.
Like with video game sort of ideology. Like,
yes.
But I know some of the younger people doing that, and it is kind of mind-blowing still. I mean, it's so different than what I do too, because I'm just overdubs and that type of thing.
I mean, exactly. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just so different, and I've never felt the need to try and follow it or figure it out, because I'm not really a commercial artist, and I suppose also I'm really well, I'm not interested in machinery. I have an aversion to machinery. I'm dependent on this phone, but I don't have a car. I don't even know. I can just about change a light bulb if I can find another light bulb to replace it. But machinery and learn manuals and operating stuff, and I don't have a recording. I'm the only person in Nashville without a home studio.
How do you like living in Nashville?
I really like it when I'm there. I mean, I'm taking off and landing a lot, but it's a great musical. It's a hive of musicians, you know. It says "Welcome to Music City" when you get to the airport.
Yeah.
They're not kidding. You know, they're very good people to find, and they will play stuff that sound like you've been playing together for a month and you've just met.
Right.
See why Dylan did Blonde on Blonde all those
And
years
John
ago.
Wesley Harding
You know,
down there.
yeah, just so. And some of those guys are still there. Charlie McCoy's still there.
Interesting.
Who played bass on John Wesley Harding and Nashville Skyline.
Do you
and he was
seek any of them
he was
out?
the musical director on Blonde on Blonde. I've met him and Wayne Moss, who played guitar on Blonde, and that was interesting. But it was at a kind of dillathon, you know. It was people asking questions.
Okay.
We were on a panel, but I said, what did you make of Bob Dylan? You know, the lyrics compared to what you were used to working with. How did this strike you? And he said, well, if you're asking me, did we have weirder people than Dylan? We certainly did. The answer is yes. But I think he's also someone who doesn't want to seem like he would be fazed by anything, you know, like, wow, we get all sorts here and we can deal with them, you know. That
Right.
sort of,
Yeah.
okay, fine, up you, you know. But
Yeah,
I
like
just,
Dylan's no big deal kind of thing.
well, thinking about what he was and what Nashville was then, it's a very strange collision. But I remember back then, you know, the scribes in Rolling Stone going sort of, what the heck, what's he up to and what, you know.
But yeah, it goes with his just I don't know, just going against type, or just going like kind of almost like putting himself into like, hey, I'm just one of the guys and I'm coming down here with my songs, like old timey. It's almost like that old timey. I think you would be great at like writing 10 songs and taking just random Nashville studio musicians and just making a record in 3 days. Did you ever think about doing that? Or have you done that?
I do. I haven't, but I might while I'm still there.
Be good.
If I could write in that, and I do think about it, what would it be like to write 10 songs in a, but again, you see, it's old-fashioned. I don't, you know, like,
But that's good.
I wouldn't be writing 10 bro country songs about
No.
how I'm out there with my Republican chick drinking Republican beer in a Republican car, thinking,
I wouldn't expect
you know,
that.
I would, and that's what it is, because you know, as far as I can see, the whole
Should be
thing is
Robyn
it's
Hitchcock
a
songs.
yeah. Well,
you know.
see, as a flaming hippie socialist,
It
my
should be like you should be flaming hippie
and
socialist, Robyn
you know,
Hitchcock.
Dylan was a radical Jewish. The last anyone knew about him, he was a kind of Jewish radical intellectual dude from New York who suddenly was down there recording with these good old boys, and people were going, "What the fuck?
love
You know,
that.
what's he doing?" And then he, you know, within 3 albums, he was making Nashville Skyline. He was sounding like one of them, and then everybody, you know, the Rolling Stone and all, you know, everyone else said, "What, you know, what's our boy doing? He's gone over to the other side. You know,
Yeah.
this is Nixonian, damn it." And, you know, Dylan was going, "Oh, love is all there is," you know. But all he'd done was swap places with the Beatles.
Yeah.
And
And he's just punk rock to the end. That's the thing about him.
Well, he's perverse. You know, I think that's
exactly.
whatever you. I think that's the only you can safely say. Whatever you think he is, he's going to try and prove he's the opposite.
Yeah.
So, you know, he relishes doing adverts for women's underwear.
Yeah, but isn't that the artist's job in a way, like to like sort of shake people's perceptions like that?
Yeah, probably including shaking one's own. And it's probably
Yeah.
good to kind of actually wrong foot yourself, you know. I think
Because
I'm
then
this kind of
the
person.
recovery's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, taking chances and making mistakes on purpose almost.
Well, yeah, sometimes maybe the only way you can do something new is by making a mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, musically, it's not necessarily so good in life, but
Well,
although you could
yeah, it is.
you could argue that mistakes are just things that take a long time to work out. You know,
That's true.
What seemed like a mistake after 15 years actually proved to be an interesting move. But
Right.
I don't know. You find that?
I find that to be true.
Yeah.
Like the worst things in my life that have happened to me so far have provoked the most positive changes. So I mean, so therefore, like, okay, is it bad? I mean, yeah, there is suffering and there's pain there, but and still, you know, it lingers. But at the same time, that's also what fuels me towards like a life outside of apathy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, so it's the element, it's the random coming in. It's allowing that to come in, which is in a way also part of maybe accepting that one's ego or one's desire to control things is kind of limited. Like, you know, we're at the mercy, we're on those currents, you know. We are the fish, we're not the sea. We are the birds, we're not the air. We don't, to some extent, everything we do has an effect, and yet nothing can be controlled. So everything has significance, but nothing can be interpreted. You know, it's...
what do you mean by that?
I mean that, you know, like the butterfly wing theory and all that. That everything, you know, if you snap your fingers, somehow this will affect a childbirth in Shanghai or something, and that child will grow up with an obsession with fingers, and then, you know,
we're fucking with kids in China right now.
Well,
dude.
you're doing it more successfully than I am. Oh no, yep, good, yeah.
Turns out I can do.
Yeah, see,
snapping
that's
better
it.
than Robyn.
Yeah,
That's one thing I got on you.
Mr. Arthur's snapping.
So,
So yeah, you know, but exactly. But you don't really know what it is.
yeah.
You never know what it is.
Do you believe in free will?
Does it believe in me? I don't know. I mean,
Do you think, like, you know, the theory that, like, I don't know, like Sam Harris talks about, like, he's like a philosopher, current modern philosopher guy that talks about there's no such thing as free will because everything is like predetermined and stuff like this. It's above my pay grade to talk about it with any kind of brains, but
I mean, it doesn't. I don't know if it makes any difference. Maybe on some level, everything. If it is predetermined, it's so complicated that
who knows?
You can't look in the manual and see. I mean, you can always see what you should have done eventually if you live long enough. You have some perspective.
Yeah.
If you leave a song alone for 5 years, you can usually finish it.
Yeah.
And, you know, perspective certainly works with art, I think.
Do songs usually take a long time for you, or real quick, or is it all?
They
all
usually,
over
the essence of a song usually comes through in 30 seconds. If it's going to be a song, I've got it. Sometimes I lose interest in a song and I have to go back and see where at this point has it lost me. I've taken a wrong turning. I have to go back. But sometimes songs just get a bit complicated and I can't. More to do with editing, you know.
What about Queen Elvis?
Queen Elvis came quite fast. But actually, the way I perform it now has changed from the recording. I think there's one less verse somewhere, or there's one less middle bit, or when people who've learned it from the record and they say, let's do Queen Elvis, and
they always fuck it up.
Well, I fuck it up because because it's mutated. You know, some songs, McCartney's very good at this. He comes up with an arrangement and he'll play the same one forever. Bob Dylan at the other end, you know, the paint doesn't dry on his compositions. After about 15 years, they just start to get runny, and then after 30 years, they're shapeless.
One's oil paint, one's acrylic.
Well, then Paul's
acrylic.
know. Paul's acrylic. He dries very fast, whereas Bob, yes.
There's paintings in the MoMA that still aren't dry.
Well, most of his never seem to dry, and I think that's what the listener doesn't understand, is that for him they're probably not finished.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Paul goes, this is it, and it'll be like this forever. He'll play the old arrangement he did on Revolver, and it's very satisfying because you get exactly what you remember.
Right.
But Dylan's more challenging, I suppose, but also sometimes incomprehensible. And for me, I am more of the Paul and the Dylan, but I notice my songs mutate. They just change, just the arrangement changes a bit, you know, and some of the phrasing. And do you get that with your really old? If you play something from like 20 years ago.
Yeah, I always mess with them. I'm more like, I guess, from the Dylan school of thought with that. I would think, you know, like I just reinvent them.
Yeah.
I find fans to be fickle when that happens.
They don't like it sometimes.
They get upset when the artist doesn't perform the album version.
People
they don't understand the concept that to them the song is not that anymore.
People like what they first heard. That's the thing.
God, I have so many other questions for you.
Damn it.
Damn it, like I wanted to ask you about psychedelic drugs and therapy.
Ask me about psychedelic drugs and therapy.
Okay.
It's like those badges people would wear, you know.
Well,
ask me about psychedelic drugs and therapy.
The reason I wanted to ask you is because your songs have this complicated space of like self-reflection.
Yeah.
And I just want to know where that comes from, and also they have this psychedelic edge to them too, and I just want to know where that comes from, and then you can go.
Well, sir.
Not before that.
Well, not before that.
Since you ask. I never took very much in the way of psychedelic drugs.
Yeah.
But I absorbed a lot through the people I listened to. So because I was 14 in 1967, when everybody I loved was basically tripping quite heavily or had, that attitude to some extent came through. But by the time I took LSD, which I did a few times in the 70s, I was very wary of it. I didn't think, okay, you know, this is it, I'm gonna levitate, I'm gonna float above New Mexico, my third eye is going to open.
Your third eye was already open.
Well, it was as open as I felt it was going to be, so I simply could see some effects and some interesting visual effects, but I never saw anything that really wasn't there. Certain things were, you know, like I noticed for the first time that the local recording studio had a really disgusting piece of fungal mold in the kitchen, and I'd never spotted it before. I think it was just, you know, I suddenly realized what was actually there, you know. It probably made me just look, and I thought, that guy looks like a tomato, you know. I just sort of, I think but I also felt like psychedelic drugs, acid was going to interfere with my ego. I tried writing a poem when I was tripping, and I thought, there's no point writing a poem because it's all actually happening around you. What are you going to say? You know, and I felt dwarfed. You know, I just thought it was like when I was a kid, I was jealous of the sun because it was more important than I was. My ego was so fragile that I didn't like London because it was too big for me.
You gotta write a song called "Jealous of the Sun."
Oh, I was, my God, yeah. Well, I'm jealous of the sun. Well, I was. Now I'm sort of thinking, oh, great, there's some sun out, you know. But I wasn't even competitive. I was so fragile. I just would feel kind of threatened by things and then run away.
I was just jealous by Kiss.
The
band. I just wanted to be like on that album cover in makeup with like spitting blood.
Did you ever try it?
No. So what about the therapy end of that question?
The therapy end is something that I'm still exploring, and I think it's really good. And as my wife Emma just showed me a little cartoon someone had done on the net, which just said most people in therapy are suffering as a result of people who won't have therapy. You know, actually working on yourself, looking into yourself. You know, it's in a way, it's like a plane trying to undergo repairs while it's flying. You know, you've got to go up in the wing and fix the engine, Sarge. There's no choice. Oh, blimey, really? It's windy out there. I know, but you're the man for it, Bates. Go. Yeah. And it's that sort of, I think it's really important to do it. I totally endorse therapy. I know you can maybe be too self-involved, but I don't know. I think the alternative is people who, what was it Donald Trump said? Oh, I don't like to look into myself. I might not like what I see.
Did he say that?
Yeah, it kind of says it all, really. Yeah. Go on, Donnie, take a look. I'll hold your hand. Let's see what's behind the door that says Daddy.
Oh, my God. Well, that's what I mean. You have songs that like mention like there's so many ways you can mess up a child.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Those kind of lines. You know, you go and you've been going there for so long. I'm assuming you're. The way you're talking about therapy, it seems like you kind of that's more recent. But what you've been exploring that terrain for eons. It seems like. Is that right?
Probably. I mean, I suppose I'm introspective, if you see what I mean, and I understand, but it also, I think it's made me understand other people and become more sympathetic because you know, I'm not a naturally empathic person. I have an awful lot of noise in my head, and I'm always reacting to stimuli around me. It's probably why I can't really deal with drugs much, because that stuff is just too
much.
It's too much,
yeah.
and for me the gain is turned up quite high in life
Already.
Anyway, so I feel like a mic that's about to feed back, and but Swifto, hang on, I'm just coming, darling.
Sorry.
God.
I'll go get her.
Listen, thank you for doing
Thanks.
this.
God. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, we could talk forever.
It's a pleasure. No, I've got to head off because Em is.
Dude, I really appreciate you doing
Thank you,
it.
Robyn.
She's just come and got the stuff, so we've got to get to the thing. She's starving.
I'll see you tonight.
Are you playing at the gig?
I'm playing at the gig.
Fantastic.
We'll be on stage. Hi, this is Joseph Arthur. Thanks for checking out Come to Where I'm From. Please support us on Patreon, patreon.com/come-to-where-I'm-from. We are an independent podcast, and any contributions you can make are greatly appreciated.